the narrative that existed, like, hey, the wealth gap is what it is. It's going to be extremely difficult, if not impossible, to attack it and close it. And not necessarily. There are things that most individuals can do. Again,
Yo, B, let's go.
You may have seen the clip and maybe heard word of mouth, yet another podcast. Man, what could it be about? Is it truth or opinion? A couple of contradictions. We're here to challenge tradition and twist your vision. So we set on a mission to bring you rebel wisdom.
welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Rebel Wisdom. I'm Julian here with my co-host B, and today we're gonna talk about the wealth gap a little bit in America. You know, we'll kind of dive into that topic in the true Rebel Wisdom fashion, starting by kind of identifying what the narrative is towards the wealth gap and maybe how, I don't know if I'd say most people, but a lot of people think that it's extremely difficult, if not impossible, to even close the wealth gap, or like, you know, how do we go about attacking that? And, you know, we usually like to start with our, you know, maybe personal experiences or opinions or things we notice. And you know, talking about this topic, something I just thought about is, as a just normal everyday American citizen and navigating my life, try to think on what I've observed or what I see about the wealth gap. And I think it's, I don't know if cyclical is the term, but what I'm trying to get at is, I feel like for, you know, if we take individual family structures, if a family is on the negative end of the wealth gap, or, you know, the lower end, I feel like I've seen, or maybe an idea is perpetuated that, like, hey, it's more likely, I guess, for them to stay on that end. And also, again, if you take a kid that's born into the other side of the wealth gap, maybe I think they have more chances, or maybe in the mindset that, like, okay, I belong on this side of the wealth gap. And it kind of just, it creates this, like, mental cycle of, like, okay, we're on this side of the wealth gap. So maybe people think, like, I belong on this side, or I'm going to stay on this side just because of, you know, that's where you started as a human before you have real responsibilities and before you're a contributing member. So I'm interested to explore, like, again, that's just like the entering, like, mindset of if you're on one side or the other. And then again, like, what if you're on the negative end of the wealth gap, what you could do maybe, or things to start thinking about to bridge that gap. Or even if maybe you're on the positive end of the wealth gap, like, that'd be interesting. I think that'd be arguably more interesting. Like, what, I don't know, maybe could you do to impact society to maybe help the wealth gap, even though it might not affect you as directly? I don't know, that's just food for thought at that point, spitballing. But I do think there's like a polarizing, I don't know, mindset of families or individuals on either side of the wealth gap. I don't know if you have any entering ideas or thoughts on it. But that's just something that, like, comes to mind.
When you said on the other side of, on the lower side of the wealth gap,
Yeah.
personnel, I guess family, and then what you said, you know, we're gonna basically, like, try to do whatever to close the wealth gap, right?
Yeah.
That's all.
Ideally, like, that's the goal.
And then when you brought up on the other side, on the rich end of the spectrum,
Right.
I thought you were gonna say how you can make the gap bigger. I was like, oh, narrative wise, that would have been not the best.
No.
Okay,
Yeah.
But it is funny, like, to your point on for the rich people, even, right? Definitely the goal isn't to make the gap bigger, but, you know, a lot of people say the wealth does die off in the second or the third generation because maybe the money gets passed along, but the knowledge and the skill set doesn't. So just one thing that I wanted to point out, I think this topic is relevant for poor, rich, middle class, white, black, Asian, Mexican, anything and everybody
demographic.
Yeah. And then I think you said it, mindset, right? I think the number one factor of whether you're going to be successful or not, and we're definitely talking about in a monetary sense for the word successful, and I think that comes from the family and, you know, two types of education. So obviously quality education that everyone thinks about. That would be like, hey, go to good schools, good colleges, and getting a good job.
Right.
And the second one is also in the education realm, but the financial literacy portion, which, in high school, like the public education system, even a lot of colleges, you don't really learn about the financial literacy. That comes from your self-study or from your family. And depending on what you get taught as a kid about money, that can definitely set you on the same track as what your family has gone through in the past couple generations.
Right. So listening to you, dude, there was this one, oh man, my dad actually sent it to me a while ago. Time back to one of the first things you said about like generationally, it says it usually, you said 2 to 3 generations?
Yeah, I think it's 3, but yeah.
Yeah, there was this like snippet, I don't know if it was a motivational speaker or something, but it was this guy that was giving this like theoretical situation. And they had like the cool music playing in the background, and there was this guy with this like very good like speaking voice, or again over this music, and it sounded really cool. But basically, in a nutshell, what he was saying, I wish I had a clip that we could like play, but he was like, he gave a little like anecdotal story. He was like, there's this guy that grew up poor, and he worked hard his whole life, and he amassed, I don't know, let's say millions. I'm paraphrasing. He amassed millions, and he became very successful. He worked to gain the knowledge. And then with the knowledge, like he got the wealth. Then he grew up, he had a son, and his son took over the business. He passed down some of the knowledge. Son didn't have as hard of a work ethic, but kept the business afloat. Then he had a son who went to school, wasn't really interested in the business, didn't really use his degree, but, inherited the money, wasn't as successful. Then he had a son that just saw the money, had no work ethic, was really spoiled. And he basically, it was like a minute and a half audio clip, and he broke down how generations, like the dude went from broke, got the wealth, and then like the mindset through the generations, money, and then it less, and then like 4 generations removed, it was back to like a kid wasn't hungry to learn and basically had no money again. And it was just such an interesting, like I said, he broke it down really quick, but it was so interesting to hear again kind of the cycle of how people think, and then from that how the wealth, the generational wealth kind of like tapered off, and it became back to the beginning, and now it's going to be somebody that's going to have to kind of start from scratch again. When certainly there's ways to have that money, make money generationally and pass down the wealth and the knowledge, which I think is a big piece. But I remember my dad sent me that clip, and I was like, it was like so deep, and I was like, dang, like
that's why the Rockefellers are really impressive.
Yeah,
because they're like 7th or 9th generation or something like that, right?
Right.
And they get richer and richer. Have you seen the recent story, like article? It could not be recent, but I saw it a few times recently about like 50 Cent and his kid.
I haven't.
And like obviously like 50 Cent, like very successful rapper and entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
And basically his son, he's like in his late 20s. Basically, I mean, you can imagine he grew up rich his entire life.
Bro, yeah, for sure.
And then at age 27, he's basically like begging his dad, 50 Cent, he calls it child support in a literal sense. Like he's expecting 50 Cent, his father, to support his child, which is himself at age 27. And he was like, yeah, I need like 10K monthly or something like that. For spending money,
right? But like, what do you
without working? Yeah. So it's like,
dude, that isn't shit. I think
that's a lot of like, you see it literally. I would imagine a lot of people has experienced it where other people are rich and their parents are very successful, and because of their parents' fruits of labor or their investment habits and their financial status, they get to kind of reap the rewards as well. And then it looks like they're like I don't want to say gold, like they have like a little star on them, right?
Yeah.
Like they think that they have a little glow on them.
Right.
So, but yeah, no, like if you become rich, like the lottery ticket winners, as long you have to learn the financial literacy piece.
Exactly.
Because like literally that money can be blown in literally one generation.
Yep.
So yeah, financial literacy, like we talked about it in the, our education is flawed episode, which I still think it is in so many ways.
Definitely.
I don't understand why we can't throw in a curriculum of financial literacy. It can be like a 1 week program every single year for your grade or something, or one class towards junior, senior year.
Right.
That would help out people.
Yeah.
So much.
And I know very little about the education system, and I'm sure the curriculum has to be tailored to a list of wickets that have to be met for every kid's development, yada, yada, fool, I'm sure. But I also am confident that can be reformed and changed. And like, right, why wouldn't such an important and relevant topic, it's so relevant, like everybody's going to experience money, like how can that, it's probably based on some antiquated process that, we've just gone off of for years. And I'm going to say nobody wants to, I'm sure somebody wants to, but I don't know. I don't know why that's not being incorporated, but like you said, it just seems like a huge flaw that we talked about in another episode. But it's I don't know. It's just kind of gets you worked up. So I have a question I want to put. Well, so I'll get to a question. Again, and talking about this, I'm just kind of thinking, right, from a mindset piece too, because and we can kind of go to the financial literacy. I kind of want to go into that a little bit deeper, but I was just thinking, and this is just one of those fun hypothetical questions. If you, knowing what you know now, could be born in that quick story I just like narrated, if you could be born into one of those spots, but when you're born, you don't have the knowledge you know now. You just have the knowledge now to like put yourself, like restart your life. Would you be born into like an ultra wealthy family, like decently wealthy, like middle class, or poor? Because with the assumption that, if you're born into a maybe middle to lower class, you would have a higher work ethic. Or if you're born into the higher class, you would have less of a work ethic. But obviously you would have the capital, resources to kind of start something. Whereas, on the other end of the spectrum, you'd have less capital to kind of maybe start or play with to learn. But you might have a little more drive. And again, that is not me saying that is not like, if you're born into a rich family, don't have a work ethic. And if you're born into a, if you're born into a poor family, you do have work ethic. But, I just think that's an interesting question to play with. Like,
shoot, I'll probably just go with the middle, because I feel like you get, you definitely get, strengths and weaknesses of both.
Yeah. As far as you don't know, you can't say for sure, like, what your attributes would be.
Because if you're restarting your knowledge, like, level and your experiences, growing up, even if you grew up in middle class and then like you have a good life, you don't know if being rich or being poor is better or worse. Like, you have it good. If you have it good, then why not, just take that.
Yeah.
And then from that, like, middle class families, like a lot of blue collar or, management type white collar jobs, like families like that. So I think you can learn a lot of good things from it.
Yeah. What so layering on that question, because like if we could go back with the knowledge we have now, I think the answer would obviously be wealthy family, because we'd have money and we'd have knowledge, and like we're taking off. If you could, all right, let's say we'll pick with you. You were born in the middle class, right? You have decent amount of money, enough to have all the necessities and some nice things. If you could influence one aspect of your life, like if you could have one aspect of your life, I guess, where you could, we're trying to get at, like, if you could influence, like, or maybe a better question would be, what aspect do you think is best to get somebody on the higher end of the wealth gap? Like, if you could prioritize one thing, that's a better way to put it, one aspect, would you be like, do you think education's most important? Do you think family is most important? Do you think environment is most important? Do you think social economic class is most, like, what do you think is one of the societally one of the biggest driving forces of what can lean a family one way or another as far as the wealth gap? It's a pretty nuanced question.
Yeah, I think it is education, because even though there's a lot of self-learning, most of the finance stuff is self-learning, but you have to have an environment that kind of gets you interested in the first place.
Okay.
And we talked about, I forget which episode it was, but you got to find a dream in the fire under you first.
Mm-hmm.
because they can teach all these financial literacy in public school, which would be amazing.
Yeah.
But if the person receiving the education is just kind of doesn't care or has a belief that like, oh, it doesn't really matter to me,
Right.
it's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to, even though the cause was good, the effect of it is not going to be well received. I think it's, yeah.
Okay. I was thinking on that. Education is a big one. Dude, I think I would say almost like family or, and this is as you get older, this isn't like a kid. I mean, or like who surrounds you. And for me, my answer is twofold. One, the fire piece you talked about, it's first having the idea or the desire. You need, which education could introduce some of these ideas, but like you need people around you to be like talking about some of these things. You need to be introduced to it. And like we're saying, the education system doesn't really go into finances, and maybe that's slowly changing. Like when I went to school, there was really like no finance class. So I almost think like parental figures or like mentors or again like family circles is almost equally important. One, to introduce you to these ideas and to teach you, like, so it's education, I guess, in a non-formal way, like not at school, but like education amongst family. Like what are, we don't have kids, but as we grow into parents, what are we talking about in the household? I almost think I would value that. Like, I mean, education, formal education is a super close second, but, and I also think this is funny because you and I have talked about before, like, you've been in the military and me currently serving, just the conversations as we've navigated the military, like people were around shifted, like people talk about certain things, whether it's college and stuff. And, once these conversations are going, once you're embedded in these conversations, you hear them so often, you begin to gain an interest for stocks or for real estate or, like when we were stationed together, we just used to hear these things all the time. And then you and I, we started talking about it all the time because people around us were talking about these things and they were, you know what I mean? And there's so many segues we can take from this conversation. This goes into the social economic background or, where you live or also education. But yeah, I just think, I guess it's part environment, part like family, but I would say, yeah, like the non-formal education and like who you surround yourself with, I think is huge, especially on the earlier ends of your financial journey.
Yeah.
Because obviously there's going to take self-research, right? And you kind of hit on that too. Like you're going to have to do some things yourself. But again, it always helps to have people to go through that journey with or to bounce those ideas off of or to, you know what I mean? So, yeah. I just think that's
putting yourself in the next level of circles. That's,
yes.
That's a tough one because
this isn't easy, but
because I definitely have friends that I could cut ties with to, get myself into better circles, with air quotes.
Cut ties, yeah.
But then, like, I don't, because, they say, you have to surround yourself with your 5 closest friends, or you're the average of your 5 closest friends or something. So, it cannot, or monetary, or in terms of, money, that means that you would have your closest 5 friends would be rich as possible, like if you could optimize it, right?
Yeah.
So with that being said, I thought about, like, I thought about the topic, I never thought about doing it, but like at some point there's gonna be it's a personal choice whether you want to chase the wealth when there's nothing wrong with that, or like you kind of say, hey, what I have is enough, and I'd rather have these relationships that I value more than money. So I think there's a good balance. But with everything said, I do agree with the mentorship piece, because you can have such a wrong figure. You could be interested in stocks and stuff, but if you heard it from the wrong people, it's like, penny stocks, day trading, options, crypto, these scammy quick get rich quick schemes, stuff like that. And it's more of you treat it more of a casino gambling style rather than an investment. That's not gonna really, it's not gonna work out for you in the long run.
Right.
So yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah. I didn't want to paint this picture, nor would I recommend it. Somebody seek friend, I guess, groups or friends. Like, this is by no means, I don't think like you should be like the brokest person in your friend circle or only try to get like wealthy friends. Like, Not at all. It's more so just, I mean, honestly, just people that are driven or passionate, just curious. Because I think if we based all of our friendships solely off monetary value, it probably like a friendship is so much more nuance.
Yeah.
There's experience with it. Yeah. So I definitely want
people
to clear the air on that.
Yeah,
but-
people say that. I have heard so many times they're like, you should know the least, and you should be the poorest in your circle so you can work up to it. And then, I mean, if you want to optimize everything, and then the final end game of your life is money, which, like I said, there's nothing wrong with, then you would prioritize that. But then if you don't have that goal as your ultimate goal, then you wouldn't do that.
Right.
But
The only question to that is be like, okay, well, what are you sacrificing? Like, there's going to be a lot of disingenuous friendships and you know what I mean? So sure, you can do that, but like, you're going to be missing out on so many other aspects of a friendship, that a true bond, or, whatever it may be. It'll be.
No, that's why it's for the person that their end goal is money.
Right.
And then that means friends wouldn't really be in the picture. It'll be more like business partners and stuff like that.
That theory is along the lines of, the phrase I always say, like, you never want to be the smartest person in the room. I mean,
Yeah.
Same. Yeah. All right, but go ahead. You were about to say something.
Okay, so going on to the next one, I hear a lot of people, or like you, if you listen to anything financial, TikTok, Reddit, YouTube, whatever, the social media side, you've heard the saying like, "Oh, save on that $5, $7 coffee a day, and you can have X amount of years, or you can have X amount of dollars in X amount of years."
Right.
Which I do agree with. The math does work out, and like if you save $5 a day for 40 years straight, you will have a lot of money. You will, but it's also 40 years, right? That's a very long time. And are you actually willing? That's a cherry on top, I think. But I think the bigger stuff is your rent or your mortgage, your living situation, because you get your overall income from W-2, 1099, side hustle, investment, whatever you do.
Yeah.
And afterwards, your biggest expense is typically taxes. Income tax, property tax, Social Security, sales tax that a lot of people don't consider. And after that is usually your living situation, whether that be a rent or mortgage.
Okay.
And then, if you're in the very lucky minority, you wouldn't have any house payments. And I think that's much easier to save money, I guess, with less effort. Because let's say the alternate,
what's more easier to save money with?
Changing your your budget amount of your rent or mortgage.
Okay.
Because if you save $5 a day, let's say 30 days in a month, that's $150 a month that you're saving, right?
Yeah.
But then if you could, instead of having a two bedroom apartment to 1 bedroom apartment, you save $500 on rent, then you can still have your car, right? And that's an easier, less effort change that you can make. And then there's a very critical asterisk that, the whatever you save, that has to be invested. Like, that's the whole idea. Right. If you don't invest it in the first place, you just save money. You're just, that nothing changed for you.
Still missing out on that game.
Yeah, right.
The potential game, yeah.
So yeah, a lot of people talk about these coffee things, but fewer people talk about, hey, how can I, change maybe you live 10 more minutes further away. Like if you get to work in 15 minutes, but now you get to save $700 a month and you have to make your commute 25 minutes. I would say that's a good trade-off.
Right.
And that's $500, $700, that's a good chunk that you can invest at a much higher, if you do $500 versus $5 a day, you'll have a lot of more money.
Yeah. I know somebody's gonna be like, oh, but hey, you're further away. Now you got more gas expenses. But still, you're still gonna be saving money. Even if you're spending that little bit more on gas for 10 minutes, it's not gonna compare it to, like you said, what you could save.
On the wealth gap side, a lot of people talk about all these, the wealth gap happens because people with assets, keep accumulating assets, and, they go higher up on the wealth ladder. And people that don't have assets, they get beaten down by inflation. And that's how wealth gap gets bigger and bigger. And a lot of the things I hear online is the whole anti-landlord movement, right? On the topic of, living situation. And then it's funny because like people are like all these greedy landlords, blah, 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 blah. Like, yeah, I'm sure there are a lot of greedy landlords. And I say landlord in this case as like a corporate company, right? The people that own the apartment complex.
Okay.
Like they're not your mom and pop investors.
Yeah.
I have one house, I'm moving, and then we rent it out.
Yeah.
Because those people, they're just renting it out for market rent.
Yeah.
Usually. There's a give and take. The give is that, hey, you have this nice, livable condition house, and in turn, I get rent. That's the trade-off, right? And then, yeah, like people are so like, I think the outliers kind of ruin it for everyone else. I'm sure everyone's seen the slumlord or heard about the slumlord that won't fix anything, that won't upgrade anything, and they make it super hard for you to, say, uphold their end of the bargain on the agreement.
Yeah, like you said, that's not the norm. Yeah, that's the outlier.
Yeah, so but like, the whole point, and if they say, they're so greedy, they're gonna keep getting rich and rich and rich. That's not necessarily like their problem, I guess. Right? They have they have something to offer, and they're selling on the marketplace, and someone willingly paid for it.
Yes.
Right. Yep. The better thing to say is like, if you think these greedy landlords are getting rich off housing, why don't you go buy a house? It is much easier to say, but if you follow I don't want to say like universal truths, but at least universal, or like I guess like social, cultural, societal truth, at least in the United States, is you have a good job, like a good technical skill that you have that you can offer in the marketplace. You work hard. Maybe you work hard with your spouse. I would say majority of the people is able to afford a house, even at this like crazy interest rate environment that we're in right now. Because it's just simple math. Because it's, if you make 80K as a household household, that's the average.
Yeah,
you can definitely buy some like a 400K house if you needed to, right?
Yeah.
Obviously the math and the change on the down payment, interest rate, and whatnot. But yeah, like I hear all these like movements like anti-landlord, just go do it yourself, right? I guarantee there's enough houses for everyone to buy in the United States that wants to. Not everyone, but like that wants to.
Oof. So again, so much good stuff there. Couple things that I'm gonna double down on. Yeah, man. I think I have heard of the anti like landlord movement and stuff, and I don't know if it is more like commercial or people, for apartment complexes and not your run of the mill every day. Like, hey, I have a couple single family homes that I rent out, like you said, at like market value. I don't know if it's trying to attacking all landlords or, like I said, just the bigger or more commercial ones. But it's interesting. So when we started the podcast, and you were talking about the polarizing sides of the wealth gap, and you said you thought I was gonna say,
how to increase stuff.
Yeah, like they're gonna increase the wealth gap. No, but like, and I don't think anybody's consciously thinking like, oh, I want to contribute to widening the wealth gap. No, but like, everybody wants to make money. So if you're in a situation where you have a lot of money and you have the opportunities to make more money, which may subsequently contribute to widening the wealth gap, like they're not gonna not make money to, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, everybody on any that lies in any part of the economic spectrum is gonna try to make money. So, which I feel like we've addressed in other episodes, but like, why not try to emulate or find out what some of these people are doing to make that money, and your journey might not be like theirs, but try to emulate what they're doing and replicate what they're doing. So, as we often do, falling back to the houses again. And I think, what's the bigger podcast book? The house hacking advantage?
The house hack? Oh yeah,
the house hack. I like that book. Was it Craig Krulop or whatever?
Yeah.
I like that book because there's so many examples in there of, and this is a book I'm pretty much like how to house hack, but it gives every flip, wholesale, long-term, short-term rental. Like, it just gives all types of of strategies, basically. But it gives so many examples of, like, there was this college kid that had no money who rented a trailer, lived in that, say, for 3 years, and got, there was a single mom with 3 kids who did blah, 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 blah. She got her one house, maybe, I don't know, a 3-room house. She lived in one room, rented the other 2. And they just give so many nuanced examples, but that pretty much highlights that most people in most situations, you can find a way or tailor, like, if you really want to. And now, again, a big part of this is sacrifice, right? But, like, if you do sacrifice, it's not that it's not doable. And this is reiterating what we're talking about for the narrative that existed, like, hey, the wealth gap is what it is. It's going to be extremely difficult, if not impossible, to attack it and close it. And not necessarily. There are things that most individuals can do. Again, it's just the financial literacy, or the knowledge, the sacrifice. That's that's where you got to start to help protect this. But yeah, I think the understanding that from the top perspective, or the higher earners, and they're not gonna slow down. They're gonna continue to make money, as they should. And then again, going back to the attacks on the landlords, I think, yeah, I would encourage people to be landlords if you can. I think where it gets dicey is, like, the ethical piece behind it. Inherently, being a landlord is not bad. I think where, I don't know, there is a conversation of how you maybe go about being a landlord, or if you're just a bad landlord, like you said, you're not upgrading. I don't know if that's sort of like ethical or not, but I think that's a different conversation. But just, yeah, if you have the means, and it's not everybody's interest to own property, but if you really want to attack the wealth gap, or better your situation, or your family situation, or your generational situation, what a phenomenal way to do it. And there are things, those are more individual things. There are things outside of us, at a local or state level, that could affect this too, for, like, affordable housing, things that we have less control over, minimum wage, that you could, influence by just being an active citizen, or, voting, whatever. But so those are, like, larger picture things that could affect this problem of the wealth gap. But, we already kind of talked about some things on a more individual basis too, that I think are very important and are very attainable for, yeah, I don't know, these local economies, or these people.
Yeah, I want to comment on the house hack side. House hacking, he talked about a book, which is a really good book, but it's the idea of, basically, people say it differently, but I think the best definition of a house hack is just minimizing your housing expense.
Yeah, to boil it.
A lot of the basic, very general idea that it talks about, and a lot of people online talk about, is buying a duplex, or like a 2-family house. You live in one, and someone else, you rent out the other unit, and the idea is they cover your entire mortgage with their rent, and you get to live, quote unquote, free. And in a lot of markets, in real estate markets, like, there's not a property that you can just buy, rent out the other, and covers your mortgage, right? Mathematically, there's not many. A lot of the recent, more, I think, better idea, and you were talking about a lot of them, and people are gonna complain because, like, I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, the biggest word is sacrifice. If you want to spend less money or make more money, you have to give something up, usually in return. So the easiest thing for me, like, I have a roommate, right? I don't need a roommate, but I have a roommate just because that saves me $1,000 on rent every single month.
Yeah, you might not even want a roommate. That's the more important.
Yeah,
like, you probably don't even want a roommate, but you're sacrificing your space and your time, like your like your privacy.
But that's like a very easy way to give up your comfort in some way, not totally, right? You still have your own roomies. Maybe worst case, you have to share a shower, like big scary stuff, right? But that way, if you're making, let's say, take home pay $4,000 a month, by saving $1,000, you just save 20%. Like, you just save 25% of your monthly salary just by having a roommate. If you really if you're like, hey, how can I close this wealth gap, and how can I put myself in, if you're poor, get to the middle class. If you're middle class, get to the upper middle class, and then in the I guess upper rich class.
Right.
Yeah, like that's like the easiest way to do it. And then kind of switching gears on the second portion of your statements, you're talking about minimum wage, which my take is, regardless of what minimum wage is, I don't think it's going to close the wealth gap. Personally,
No, I think it's a contribute. It could be a contributor. It's not gonna,
because a lot like maybe, I don't know. I think my illusion of like what's popular, what's the top popular narrative online is kind of skewed, because I'm just like looking at people. There's a lot of people that's very vocal, and those vocal people are typically certain types of people that believe in certain types of things. I don't want to get too political on it.
Yeah.
But they say, like no one's getting by because the minimum wage is whatever. Like the minimum wage was never intended for someone to, you get minimum wage and that's at their peak of their like flourishing career. It was never meant to be like that. Like minimum wage jobs, typically, I'm sorry, but like a high school student can do, right?
Yeah.
Because they call for minimum wage because the labor resource is so abundant. Like the demand for the labor is very low. Anyone can pretty much do it. So that's why it doesn't call for a high, hourly wage, I guess. But then people have this idea that like you should be able to live on minimum wage. Like if you're a minimum wage, I'm not saying that there's nothing wrong with it. I worked a minimum wage job for 4 years in high school, and then beginning of college too. I started junior year, and then I worked at the same location until sophomore year of college. Right. And that was minimum wage. Nothing wrong with that. But your idea shouldn't be, I'm going to be at a minimum wage job forever.
Right. Which kind of goes back to the mindset.
Okay. Maybe a weekend part-time job. Sure. Yeah. No, that's like an easy way to make minimum wage. Sure. But then the people that's like all like, I have me and my husband's working minimum wage jobs, and I have 2 kids. Like, that's not the country's problem. That's your problem. You need to go find a job by getting a skill that's valuable in the marketplace to go get out of that minimum wage job. Right? So regardless of if minimum wage is $0 or $30, like if everything's $30 and over time inflation is going to catch up and your purchasing power is going to be less anyway, and you're going to be complaining about, oh, it's only $30 because gas to fill up my tank is $100 every time. So I don't think minimum wage is that important as people make it out to be.
Do you think it's a contributor though? Of like, do you think it has any influence over the wealth gap, or like it's like negligible?
Obviously, if I said 0, I would be.
You can.
But
yeah,
I would go what you just said. Like negligible would be the closest I could probably get to it.
Okay. Secondly, do you think inflation should? Like minimum wage should, I don't know, keep up with inflation. I don't know if it's a 1-to-1 ratio, but I'm not to some degree, like cost of living is going up. Minimum wage should reflect in some way.
I agree. Sure. I agree.
I do.
I don't think it's a bad idea to increase the minimum wage as inflation goes up. I don't think that's a bad idea, but it wouldn't contribute to you being wealthy. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I'm just picking your brain, bro. Yeah. I got you.
So, because a lot of people make it out to be.
Yeah. What? Make it out to be what? Like if they...
I'm suffering because the minimum wage is $15 or something.
Gotcha.
That's not true. That is not true. You're suffering because you're not getting a job above the minimum wage. So, how you think about it, it's always, how can I blame other people or the system? How can I blame this, third-party entity? But I was listening to, literally, I think the podcast came out maybe like 2 or 3 days ago. It's the Iced Coffee Hour with Graham Stephan, and he was interviewing Ben Shapiro. And he's for the people that know him, he's a very big Republican figure.
Okay.
Take what I say, it's very biased because he's a Republican, but he does say, and I definitely agree with him, in the United States, in this free country,
Mhm.
majority, I'm talking majority, like probably like 95% or more, the stuff that you're failing at is most likely because of your own fault. There's very little things that like like if someone was like, okay, I was missing 2 legs when I was, that's like a very minor case, right? There's going to be people like that.
Yeah.
I get it by the numbers, but then a lot of people, like, they're healthy, they're able to work, they have access to information and knowledge, they have access to 24 hours that everyone else has. But and then if they're not ahead, I would take a very large bet that it's their fault. But then they don't want to acknowledge it. It would be so much easier, like, hey, okay, maybe I'm screwing up somewhere. Where can I look in my life to fix these problems? And maybe it's the minimum wage mindset that we talked about. Okay, maybe I need to get a skill, go to school, go to like a community college, trade school, something to increase my wage. That's one of them. Okay, maybe instead of living in a nice 2-bed, 2-bath apartment in a nice part of town, maybe I can go here just as nice, but maybe it's just not as desirable. And maybe I need to start reading these, finance books that they talk about. Like, everything we talked about could be a factor of closing the wealth gap.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Oh. Again, said so much, but yeah, dude, I agree. I think, and again, I can't say I don't have any numbers that back it. If we were to do a poll, I don't know if the majority thinks that the wealth gap is like very stagnant, but just so opposed to shrinking, which I think you kind of said in there. I don't know,
is it shrinking or getting bigger?
No, they're opposed. Like, they don't think it can shrink. They probably think it's getting bigger and going to continue to get bigger.
Okay. I agree.
Yeah, I probably worded that weird. But like, kind of like you said, like that's a mindset of like removing yourself, like kind of just sitting back and observing, like, oh, this is what's going to happen. Vice taking a position of, okay, my situation, how can I influence change, in my life to drive where I fall? Yeah, like in the wealth gap. And again, there are so many. There are I recognize that there's things that influence the wealth gap that you don't have direct control over. Simply trying to state that I don't think the wealth gap is. I think we as in like the individuals, more influence over our personal situations. And then again, if you have enough people working in their personal lives, where it starts building to the masses, then that's how we eventually swing the work to shrink the wealth gap. But as always, like reflecting back on our episodes is funny because I feel like there's so many commonalities and threads. Like, we're always talking about like sacrifices, and we're always talking about, I guess, like self-accountability, like what we can do, like taking action in your own lives. And we're always talking about like mindset. It starts with like the knowledge of whatever topic we're talking about and kind of like learning about it. I think these things apply here as well, even though, a lot of times we talk about maybe like personal finances, or we'll talk about like choosing your friends, whatever. It's more of a personal issue, whereas the wealth gap is more of I think generally speaking, it's more of a like economic issue or like societal issue. But within that, there's still an individual element, which again, I guess that's another thing we're rubbling on. Like, it's not just like, obviously all the individuals make up the society, but yeah, I think looking at what level we attack it from is important in this conversation.
No, that's good. What about tax? What about taxes?
I mean,
taxes.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I think this is at least, we're recording this November 3rd, and by the time this podcast will be released, and if you're listening to this, we'll have a new president of the United States, whoever that may be. But then, tax is always a really big talking point for both candidates, usually. And
what you brought up is a big part of like our financial lives.
Yeah. Yes, because even if you have a lot of taxes or little taxes, I'm talking about within the United States, or I'm not talking about 99%. Like, the United States will never do a 99% tax rate. Like, I'm talking relatively. So even if we're in a high tax environment versus low tax environment, regardless of that, like your actions still matter more than how much you're getting taxed. Because even if you have a really good mindset, and even if they took, I don't know, $5,000 a year more in taxes because of X candidate got elected, like as long as you're still following the really good principles of what we literally talked about, you're still gonna be very well off. And regardless of the tax situation, if you're not managing your money properly, you're still not gonna be ahead.
Yeah.
So it like tax it if everything was, equal across the board, which is hardly the case for anything ever in this world.
Okay.
Sure,
Right. Yeah.
the tax would help if you have less taxes. Sure.
I mean, nobody's gonna obviously.
But yeah, like another one of those things that I think that people are like, oh, like if there wasn't so many tax, and everyone we agree with you, right? United States, there is a lot of tax. We get taxed on the money that we make, and then from there, when we buy something, we get taxed on it.
Yeah.
When we invest it and we take it out, we get taxed on it.
You can't evade it.
We buy a house in cash, we still get taxed for it, property tax, right? We get taxed for everything.
Yeah.
And it's crazy, but that's not the reason why your wealth isn't increasing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes.
And that's what I hear is like, oh, if it wasn't for the taxes, I'll have X amount of money. Sure, that statement could be true, but what are you spending that money on?
Right.
If we're talking about, we talked about in the horror episode.
Yeah.
If you're buying Gucci flip-flops.
You love the Gucci flip-flops.
Yeah, Gucci flip-flops, my favorite.
Bro, you probably got 3 pairs.
I need to buy 5. I need to buy 5 so I can wear them every day.
Keep them
and never, I can always keep it fresh.
It's funny. Are looking for the minimalism. We have episodes on both topics. Again, circular moment here. It's almost funny. Within these conversations, seeing the commonalities.
Mm-hmm. What's your thoughts on tax? Because I got more stuff.
I
bring to the conversation.
Minimum wage, I think, in which you did not say this. I think it influences it, the wealth gap. Yeah. But I stand by what you said in that I think what you do in your personal life, or savings to investment to, maybe job, labor, what you're doing to earn income is accounts for more in this conversation of attacking the wealth gap than taxes, than minimum wage. And to that point, some people's emphasis or mindset might be distracted by these things such as taxes, minimum wage, which again are issues. This is not us saying they're not issues, but for the sake of this conversation, really getting into the nitty gritty. And this is where the rebel comes in. I don't think these aren't the main contributors to the wealth gap, which is certainly a dynamic issue, right? I don't think anybody can name one. The wealth gap is caused because of X. I think there's multiple things. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a piece.
Anything for taxes?
That's what I'm saying.
As far as taxes, it would be the same idea as the minimum wage side. Okay, gotcha.
I mean, I think tax is almost. I think it's more relevant. Maybe affects the wealth gap more so than minimum wage. Again, I have no statistics backing this. It's kind of just me observing.
Okay.
This would be an interesting analysis to see. But I mean, that would take a lot of. I would need a strong economist probably to do that. But
yeah, sure. I mean, you brought up. I have no idea how I didn't think about this when we were talking about it. But at least on the taxes side, there's a lot of narrative that rich don't pay their fair share of the taxes, which sounds good, but is nowhere close to the truth. The Patrick Bet-David podcast.
Oh, Bet-David.
Yeah, Patrick Bet-David. It was in a video. I don't remember the title, but he showed a graph illustration, which I never actually saw the numbers before. But he was talking about how there's this thing about how the rich or the haves don't pay their fair share of taxes and have-nots are paying all of it, whatever, right? That's the narrative that
I've heard. Yeah, I've
But
never
then
seen the back. Yeah, okay.
he broke it down into numbers, and it was okay. Don't quote me on it's
Sure.
close. It's
Yeah.
close, but don't quote me on the exact number. But it was like the upper 50%. So you take the United States and split it in half, with the upper half making more than the lower half, right? The upper half pays like 90-something% of all income taxes.
Really?
Yeah, and then the lower 50
I wouldn't
only,
think that. I don't know. It's just
it's like the lower 50 pays for like less than 5% of the total income tax
income tax, right?
in the United States, which again, right there, that sentence alone kind of debunks the whole rich. But then I think people refer to the ultra wealthy not being taxed, right?
Yeah, I think.
Which I like. That's more of a valid statement because they say, "Oh, the rich." Rich people pay a lot of taxes. I promise you, they pay a lot of taxes.
Yeah, and that's we'd have to find like what's rich, what. Yeah.
But then I think a lot of people, like, again, it's one of those like outlier example that gets trickled down to everyone in that category, I guess, right? Because I get it. Like Mark Zuckerberg, he pays a lot in taxes, I guarantee, but he doesn't pay nearly as much in proportion as someone that works at W2. That could be true, but
he's also like
people,
0.001%.
People are. Yeah. Well, first of all, that number is so small, super duper duper small. So whatever narrative who was, we can tax a list, sure, it'll increase it, but like it's not going to change your life personally. But the second thing is like they're doing it most of the time. Not everyone, but most of the time they're doing it because it's legal, right? So it's like a systematic issue, if you want to call it an issue. But like they read into the tax code, and they have rich friends that they talk about stuff like this, and they're doing it the way that it was supposed to be done. That's not like, that's not their fault.
Yeah, it's hard, right? If you were in their shoes, it's like
you would jump not to do it, right?
Yeah.
And people that call for these things is not going to make that much of a difference to your life anyway. So that's one side of like how I see it. Another side is, what makes America great is in America, you can be, again, so a lot of people might disagree with me on this, but I believe in the United States, like anyone can succeed with the right amount of, hard work, knowledge, maybe a little sprinkle of luck. I think everyone can succeed. And that's true, like partly because of the American culture, right? Like you get the American dream that you can chase for.
Right.
And in the United States, with all these small businesses that gets a lot of help from the government.
Yes.
And publicity too. They're incentivized to work harder and build something amazing. So a lot of times there's a lot, like ego, like mission, purpose. There's a lot of stuff, but at the end of the day, they want to do it so they can get more money, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Like money is important. Like no one's denying that. But imagine someone telling you, hey, like since you make so much money, from this point on, every dollar that you get, you have to give me half. Like you wouldn't want to work as much as if you got to keep your full dollar.
Right.
So the more tax that you have on these like rich and like, tax the rich, eat the rich, like that doesn't create, that doesn't incentivize for all these creations, which they should be rewarded for. They talk about, like eat the rich, but like you realize they're putting so much food on the tables of the families of their employees. And they're making a lot of their investors rich for putting in the money into a company that succeeded. Like that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. And for the one person to be super rich because he took all the risk, he worked super hard to create something, like I think that's okay.
Right.
That was the whole point of doing it. So like, why should they be punished for it? Yeah, like, I mean, taxes. There's a lot of narrative.
Yeah.
Again, still doesn't really matter in terms like even if you tax them a lot, I don't think it'll shrink the wealth gap. It will,
Right.
best case, it'll stagnate it. It'll keep it the same
Yeah.
because they're still gonna be rich. I promise you.
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
Like, who are you going to, you want to make money in, especially if you've found a way to successfully, continually make money. Yeah, they're going to keep making money. And I don't know, to your point, like this narrative in which people think or want the rich to get taxed more to like subsidize the rest of the economy. Like, I don't want to ask this. Like, I feel like some people think like, this will be a hypothetical question. Like, do you want the rich to get taxed to like, oh, they have so much more money, therefore they can, I don't know, help with like the U.S. debt or like deficit vice, which I don't think is fair necessarily. Especially, you know, if they like worked to establish that position, establish that status, acquire that money. So it's interesting. I think people's concept of being taxed, and even something you said earlier, even if they were taxed proportionally, which I mean, I guess there's like tax brackets, so I guess there's some. I'm not too informed in that. There's some like proportionality to it.
Yeah, absolutely. You pay more.
Yeah. But to your point, in which I think is the super minority, the people that find systematic ways to, I don't know, maybe like forego some taxes that are legal though. I personally, I just don't know if I can get mad at that. Like, because you can't tell me you would be in their position and willingly, voluntarily be like, hey, there's this way you can not pay these taxes. You know what? I'm good. Let me pay these taxes.
Yeah. It doesn't line up.
I don't see it. So I don't know if it's the narrative of why people, again, these are the very high, like it's a minority. This minority, I guess I disagree with the narrative, or maybe don't understand the narrative of why people want them to get taxed so much. Or yeah, like it doesn't seem off to me in that. I don't know if it's a question of fairness, or like I said, like equality, which is also a touchy subject because in theory, right, anybody could do what they did to get where they are, but again, that's what the understanding of people all have different starting points, people have different backgrounds, like we got it. But I don't know, I'd have to do some serious thing. I don't, you know, people say it's not fair or equal or equitable. I don't know that it is. I don't know. This would be a good episode to like have a third party member have some like.
Yeah, I mean, like at the end of the day, rich are paying a lot of taxes. And if you think that they're not, like, you got to do some research or logically think about it. How could the rich just not pay more taxes than you? It doesn't make sense.
I mean, I'm sure there could be a way systematic. There's some loophole. I mean, maybe.
Okay, so even if there's
a lot of hypotheticals.
You know, Warren Buffett is famous for saying, you know, he pays less in taxes than his secretary or something like that, right?
Yeah, but that's Warren Buffett.
But this is what people are not thinking about. Maybe Warren Buffett isn't paying taxes, right? Because long-term capital gains is taxed at zero as long as you make less than a certain amount.
Right?
Imagine how much his company is paying in taxes.
Mm-hmm.
He might not be personally paying taxes, but I guarantee he'll be paying a lot. Give me 1 second.
That's a good point, dude. Yeah.
So I just pulled it up, right? Again, this is not a deep dive, but this is the first thing that came up on Google. I said, how much does Berkshire Hathaway pay in taxes? It says Buffett explained that in 2023, Berkshire has sent over $5 billion with a B as in boy, in federal taxes to the United States government. So even if that figure is a little bit off, that you get the idea. Like, rich are definitely paying taxes. Like
yeah. I'm glad you brought this up, because people definitely think of like solely on the individual, but at that level, there's so much more than that. And their portfolio, you have to consider their assets and things they run. As a really, I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, and then there's I don't know. You gotta get on. You gotta get on Reddit.
I was just talking about that the other day.
You gotta get on Reddit so you can get a take on a lot of what people are saying.
Yeah.
And I follow a lot of the finance subreddits. I see this. I'm not even kidding. Like once a week, it's this tweet where Elon Musk tweets about how he paid crazy sums of money to the United States government for taxes, right? And this lady says, oh, that's still not fair because that billions of dollars that you paid in taxes is only 4% of your net worth. You should be paying more. But I'm like,
that proportionality, yeah,
is like, well, first of all, like, who pays taxes as a percentage of their net worth? No one. Like, there's that.
Yes,
that's not a
equality.
thing.
Yes,
That
correct,
they don't.
correct.
When the IRS says makes you pay taxes, they don't say, okay, what's your net worth? Okay, your net worth is $1 million. Then you pay 7%.
Right.
Here, 70,000. That's
So
not how that
ways to
works.
get money. Yeah.
So it's just like literally their view on something is so strong. There is no logical, sane argument behind to back it up, and the narrative spreads. Like if someone really was ignorant in the tax system, which I think a lot of people are, right? I'm not saying it's a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's definitely not a good thing, but if you said that, it sounds good to the guy that's not making money, right? It's like, oh, I can't believe he only paid 4% of taxes. Now that's not how taxes work.
Yes.
So yeah, all these narrative, like you'll see all these stuff on Reddit, and the number of comments I see, like that's how I'm gauging maybe this is a popular idea or not a popular idea.
Yeah, dude, that's super good. Isn't Reddit like unfiltered to like less like than other social media sites? Like that's
I mean,
kind of why it's like people like it because it's more.
I've heard in the past like it was really bad.
Yeah,
like really bad. I don't want to even say. I don't want to even say online.
Right.
But as company matures and they're a public company now, I think they toned it down a lot.
Yeah.
But I think they're doing good things. Basically you can follow all these threads, these communities that it's like getting together with people, like-minded people.
Yeah.
Because at least if you really like about money, there's not that many like people that you can talk to about just money, right? But then in Reddit,
it's just
you're on the money page, it's like a lot of people
rabbit holes. That's pretty cool. Let's see. Yeah, I thought about. I remember when the IPO, it was like big because it's like private for so long. I thought about investing in them, but I was like, I did it. But yeah, shout out to Reddit. I need to tap in.
Yeah, but okay. I mean, we talked about a lot of. I don't want to say illusions, but a lot of these factors that they seem bigger than they are in terms of closing the wealth gap. Which my stance is, I don't. Sure, does it have a play in some shape or form? Sure, I could get behind that message, but I think there's more to it. And what I think is like, if you truly want to, decrease the wealth gap as a society, is what we kind of talked about earlier in the episode. It's about education. It's about mentorship, which is huge. Surrounding yourself with, like-minded ideologies for having interest in money, caring about money, how to get more money, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But that's very hard to apply that to a cultural, societal.
Yes.
Look at how big the United States is, right?
Right. It's hard to apply that to the whole.
That's a very, very hard thing that someone's gonna have to figure out. It's probably gonna be it's either a big company, maybe a startup that somehow figures it out, or government has to get involved in something right?
It's funny, yeah.
But a lot of people, that's not gonna happen. But it's okay. It's okay, right? And the bigger, more important question is how can I contribute to close the wealth gap if you don't like the place that you're at?
Yeah.
And I don't think there's too many people that can disagree on this statement, but if you truly want to close the wealth gap for you and your family, you have to keep chasing higher earning potential. Maybe you get an salary increase, hourly wage increase. Maybe you get a commission job that has unlimited,
Right.
uncapped salary earning potential. And on top of that, just like how we talked about in previous podcasts, it's not just the hard work. That's offense level, right? That's the first thing they have to do. You have to work hard to get the money. Second is stealing from, pillars of wealth. A is the offense to get money. B is the defense to protect your money from leaving as much as possible. Whether it's, the money's gonna leave because food, money's gonna leave because entertainment, your your car payment. But outside of the stuff that has to leave, you want to minimize what has to leave and contain all the other things. And you go into the final step of investing, wisely.
Yes.
And if you can't, and then maybe once you get the investment, then you kind of, maybe you can do it all at the same time. You can focus on, step 1, 2, and 3 in order and cycle again as you, step up in your life. But pretty much those 3 kind of covers like literally step-by-step instruction on how to close your particular position in the wealth gap to go higher up in the ladder. And for the book, it's by David Green,
right?
And it's called The Pillars of Wealth. That's where it'll talk about, step by step, how to get more money, how to save more money, and how to invest for higher returns.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, regardless of who gets elected, Kamala, Trump, doesn't matter. Democrats in office, Republicans in office, doesn't matter. You get more taxes, less taxes, doesn't matter. What matters is working hard, saving hard, investing hard. And it sounds cliche and too easy, like, oh, it's so obvious.
Right, yeah.
But the idea and the concept might be super obvious and easy to understand, but the execution is where a lot of people have trouble. And I'm still trying to improve it every single day.
Yeah.
Like, how can I do, maybe every single day might be a little cap, but, at least every month.
Consistently, yeah.
Yeah. I would say consistently every month, because I do go over, my financial goals and budgeting and doing my net worth calculation with my wife the top of the month.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's my overall thought on it.
Oh,
and I think a lot of, I don't want to say young or old, it's pretty much everyone. It feels like they want to blame an outside entity or outside factor, systemic factor that they can't control for their downfall. Maybe not even their downfall, but their inability to succeed to the level that they want.
Dude, yeah. Oh, that's good. And like just like listening to you and taking that in, I'm trying to think where the term generational wealth. Now I think about it, it's kind of like a individual term, like for the wealth gap on an individual level. Like if you want to, like you said, if you want to affect the wealth gap for the system, for the whole, like influence the actual wealth gap, like I think you need to get into politics, or you got, you got to like dedicate your life. That has to be your profession. That has to be your one goal. But to change where you lie in the wealth gap, that's essentially like your wealth, and then becomes your generational wealth. I think shifting your focus to that. And again, I'm a big fan of control the controllables. Like a quote I love, it's super simple, super straightforward. Like, what can you actually control? Because again, when you look at the system, that's government policies, and those are larger scale problems. But if you control the controllables, I just turn over to everything you just said. Now you start looking at that, the offense and defense of your wealth, and then investing. Dude, that was so well said. I think in trying to foster generational wealth, you will influence or improve your position in the wealth gap. And then again, even better, like for generations to come. And that's how over time, which is, the wealth gap, this isn't a day, week problem. This is something that's going to either expand or contract like over time. You changing the generational wealth of your family, passing down that knowledge, hopefully the habits, like the work ethic, and then the actual money, that's going to affect where your family, where your lineage lies in the wealth gap, and then close that. So I think from an individual perspective, that may be a better way to look at it than the wealth gap is like this big scary beast. But I don't know. When I hear generational wealth, it's more like, okay, my family, my lineage, like what I can control. But it directly correlates like with the wealth gap on that personal level. Dude, do you think, just in listening to this talk, like the wealth gap, is it inherently bad? Like, it's a byproduct. It's a thing. Like, I guess I'm trying to like dissect what, right? Obviously, like the wealth gap is a byproduct of, over time, the separation of people making money at different rates. I don't even know what I'm trying to add. Like,
I think I know what you're trying to say, and I think I'll give you my answer for it.
Yeah.
I don't think the existence of the wealth gap is inherently bad. I don't think so, because I think it's natural for a capitalistic.
That's what I was getting at. Yeah.
To have a wealth gap, like I get it. Maybe if you're in a true socialism, country, or in a dictatorship, communism type style, maybe you can pretty much get rid of the wealth gap, because everyone, regardless of what your occupation is, this is how much you're going to make. Mm-hmm. But I mean, obviously it has other consequences, like there's no innovation, there's no success.
Yes.
There's no overall, like overall it's negative, right? But then in a capitalistic state like the United States, I don't think there's a realistic situation where there's no wealth gap.
Yes.
There's always going to be.
If there wasn't, what would that look like? Yes, I'm saying, yeah.
And then, but I do want to say, the wealth gap, if it gets out of control, I think that's how nations do fail. Mm-hmm. If the haves and the have-nots, the bigger the gap, and also the numbers of, I guess, the poor versus the rich is out of proportion, I don't think good things happen to that particular country. And we've seen it multiple times in history.
Yeah.
So wealth gap, it's going to exist. I don't think it's bad at all. Just how shake up, how too many rich people, or too little rich people that have everything, and too many poor people that don't have anything. That's a recipe for, revolts and riots and some kind of coup d'etat or something to overthrow the government. But I don't think we're there yet, at least for the United States, and hopefully it gets
yeah there. No, I don't think we're either. I love that you know me well enough to catch on to what I was saying, because yes, that's what I was getting at, is that just a different perspective on the wealth gap. In a capitalistic, like it almost has to, like it's polarizing. It's going to exist. Like if somebody has to make more money than the other, I feel like that's kind of how our society is kind of like it is built upon. Like there's gonna be a separation. Is basically what I'm saying. So try to change where you are in that separation, but like a separation has to exist for our capitalist society, for our I think economy to like work. Which
everyone, it sounds good to completely get rid of the wealth cap, but like it's one of those things that sounds good in theory, but then if you were to actually implement it, people would not like that. So basically, someone that refuses to get a job and just lives on their lives in their mom's basement is gonna have the same amount as someone that worked, or someone that got a 12-year doctorate degree to become a doctor and working 80 hours a week. They're gonna make the same amount. And that's extreme ends. But if he said that, no one's gonna be like, yeah, that's like a great plan. Like, your hard work means nothing at that point.
Right, you're devaluing that work. And bro, on that same note, I was just thinking, like, okay, what if you have a utopian society? Yeah, everything's laid out. You get a stipend no matter what you do. And I think you kind of said it. It's gonna stifle like creativity. Innovation's gonna slow. You're not gonna have variations of items. Again, it sounds good, but in a society where everybody has the same things, or everything's the same, like that's kind of what makes America great. You have so much versatility, so much diversity, and again, there's probably a lot of contributing factors. But I think the wealth gap, I'm not gonna say influences that. Maybe it's a byproduct of that, but it's kind of like a circular system, where it's like, because you can be so innovative and have the opportunity to grow so fast and grow so high monetarily, thus creating the wealth gap, but that gap also drives people to be on the other side. I don't know. It's just like it just feeds off each other. But it's an interesting idea to play with. And again, kind of goes against the idea of, I'm not saying I'm for the wealth. I certainly would like to see the wealth gap close, but against the idea of like the wealth gap is inherently bad and everybody on the upper side of it is bad. Like, which is why I appreciate this episode so much, because I think we kind of like got in the weeds on just the wealth gap before what it is, and then again how you can attack it individually, and then also like the taxation piece, eat the rich. Like kind of talked about that a little bit too, which are big narratives surrounding the wealth gap. So, dude, yeah, this was fun. We kind of talked about we attacked the wealth gap from a lot of different angles, but I hope, and I'm even learning as we talk or learning, like I always get new ideas or just kind of new concepts to think about about society, about maybe how to influence our own lives, but hopefully somebody can take something away from this, or if nothing else, just a different way to think about something. I think freshness in thought, just refreshing perspective, it can be valuable in itself, whether, there's no action or anything, just a different way to think about things. But yeah, that's the Rebel Wisdom take on the wealth gap. Hope everybody got anything out of it. B, if you don't have anything else for us, that's it. We'll catch y'all next week.